Hey everyone, I wanted to start by saying that we'll be trying out some new segments here at Unveiled. The first one is going to be Movies Unveiled, and the second one will be Books Unveiled. However, since I have to reread many of the books I want to talk about, I think it'd be best to start with the movies. So today we're going to be focusing on a movie called Idiocracy. It's kind of funny because what started as a comedy is now slowly becoming closer and closer to reality. Idiocracy was supposed to be a satire, but now people are really understanding that this is a little bit more than just a joke. We're becoming so smart or indoctrinated that we're losing the ability to think for ourselves. We're really all trained from a young age to absorb and repeat answers, and most of us have lost our critical thinking skills, making us more dumb than educated. The movie highlights this in such a surreal and dark way, it almost gives you chills to just look back at it and see how eerie and accurate it was. Remember, this is from 2006, which is 15 years ago. It's actually quite genius for its time, and to me it's probably the best political film of the century because it makes a point through irony instead of through complex intellectual philosophies. While watching the film, you can't help but compare it to our world today. Now, before I cover the movie, I want you to think about this in relation to the Tartaria idea. Imagine if someone from the old world was to come into our modern society and experience our modern life post-2020. What do you think they would think about the pandemic and how it's been milked to further political agendas and as an excuse to segregate people based on their willingness to trust the establishment? What do you think they would say about the shoehorned identity politics that continue to divide us in the vain pursuit of creating some type of pseudo-utopia? How about the oppressive medical and education industries? I think it'd be clear as day to them that we've really lost our way and disconnected from our spiritual nature, choosing only to focus on the material aspects of human life. I think they would feel just like the main character in this film, completely stunned at how far humanity has fallen and how ignorance and depravity is praised. I think that even the most average old world citizen would be flabbergasted at the state of our modern affairs. I think that they would be devastated and feel sorry for what has happened to mankind. The mind behind Idiocracy is San Diego physics graduate Mike Judge. Sort of shocking considering his long list of achievements in the entertainment industry. However, working some small-scale jobs in the physics field, he moved on to making music and art. He played the blues and started to learn how to animate. Judge made a few shorts and then created Beavis and Butthead, which was the bane of many critics' existence. They claimed that it was his show that was dumbing down the American audiences. However, they obviously misunderstood the purpose of the show because Beavis and Butthead was based on the already dumbed-down American youth. It was supposed to put it in perspective as a satire piece. He's also famous for creating King of the Hill, another show that makes some really good points and uses satire and situational irony. These works were his foundations, and he does have many other projects that he's contributed to. However, these projects were only the start to his greatest work. This brings us to Idiocracy. The idea behind Idiocracy was a society that, instead of progressing, actually regresses, a concept that isn't necessarily something new. His experience with real-life people sparked a light in him that made him question the future of humanity. He described this future as the Jerry Springer Show. When he sat down to write the United States of America, he used his own experiences in the compulsory school system as a map for how the inhabitants of this future reality behaved. The biggest hang-ups, however, was the marketing for the film. It was clear that Fox wasn't fully on board with the picture and was treating it like a joke. They didn't even bother giving it a proper release or marketing. They let Idiocracy sit on the shelf for a year before finally releasing it. It's speculated that this hesitation came from the backlash of the companies whose names and logos were advertised in the film. Carl's Jr., Costco, Starbucks, and more were unhappy with the way that their brands were represented, and this caused the film to remain in limbo for some time. To top it all off, there wasn't even a theatrical trailer, and only a single theatrical poster. It was only released to 130 screens in September 2006, which was obviously Fox's way to fulfill their contract. Fox even had the audacity to label the film Untitled Mike Judge Comedy on movie sites. With all that against him, the film only managed to make $500,000 in theaters. It was obvious that Fox intended for this movie to flop. However, critics who had originally been denied a screening finally saw it and were thrilled, calling it one of the few films with any creativity, and it gained 9 million in home video rentals. When Judge started writing this film, he wrote it in such an extreme manner that he never thought that this would become a reality in his lifetime. Sadly, we see today that this film is manifesting faster than any of us could have imagined. He isn't a prophet, he's just someone making observations of our modern world and predicting the next logical steps if things keep going the way they are. Now, in 2021, it's more obvious than ever. Okay, so now we're going to break down the movie, and just keep in mind that there might be a few spoilers, but this movie isn't really about the element of surprise, so you can just go watch it afterwards if you want. We're only going to go over the main points. The movie begins showing the two polar opposites people. On the one hand, we have an example of the typical educated couple who are waiting for the right time to have a child. And on the other hand, we've got your typical young welfare redneck couple who already have a child and just continue having more. We see that the redneck example already has multiple baby mamas and is producing children like it's going out of style, while the educated couple are getting older and they are clearly struggling to conceive, using all kinds of methods, paying doctors, getting tests run. And we learn that the sperm count of the educated male is low, likely due to the years and years of sedentary lifestyle, EMFs, stress, or stiff work pants. Eventually, the educated male passes away from the heart attack while attempting to produce sperm for their in vitro style baby. The educated woman, who looks now to be in her mid-50s, at this point dubiously claims that she's frozen her eggs and is waiting for the right guy to come along. During all this, the redneck family has multiplied by 10, hinting that the genetics of these uneducated people are quickly becoming the majority. The film focuses on the main character, Joe. He is unremarkable in every way, an average Joe, if you will. He is selected along with a lady of the night, Rita, to be part of a government experiment, which entails being cryogenically frozen for 1 year. The purpose of this plan was to freeze their best soldiers and unleash them in some type of emergency. However, the spearhead of this project became so corrupt in the private sector that he was rightfully thrown in jail and the project was forgotten about. It's not until hundreds of years later that Joe and Rita emerge from their pods to a completely different world. Joe wakes to a bizarre world full of trash and dust. The first person he meets is an average citizen doing what average citizens do, watching TV, drinking out of a pacifier tube while sitting in his armchair/toilet. This guy basically just yells at him to go away and throws him out onto the streets. It's here that we can really see the full scope of the destruction, but he doesn't realize yet that he's in the future. Eventually, Joe finds his way into some sort of medical ward, a dreary and sad sight full of robots and slot machines. Sounds kind of like Las Vegas to me. So in this world, they too use emojis instead of words, and he even attempts to get a sip of water from this water fountain, only to find that it's full of some sugary, artificially colored drink called Brondo. The healthcare system in this time is similar to our own. There are only these blanket problems, and Joe has to wait in line to get into the Healthmaster Inferno, which is just a machine. And he's given a series of probes connected to wires that go into his mouth, ear, and butt. Much to his dismay, the probes get mixed up and he has to redo the diagnostic test. As he waits for the doctor, he picks up a newspaper and is stunned to see profanity all over the front page, but even more stunned to see the year listed, 2505. The doctor finally gets to him and doesn't really understand his dialect, tells him that he talks, quote, all faggy, unquote, and tells him to just like, you know. Joe says that he's serious, but Dr. Lexus just doesn't get it. After giving him, no information, the doctor proceeds to try and charge him money. Joe sees that the receipt has the same, presumably incorrect, date on it and thinks, wow, what are the chances? Then the doctor prompts him to put his tattoo in the machine, which Joe doesn't have. This lack of tattoo nearly sends the doctor into some sort of confused frenzy, questioning why he doesn't have a tattoo. It's at this point that Joe realizes his situation. It really is 2505. As he realizes this, the doctor also comes to a realization that he's, quote, unscannable, unquote. Joe lifts up the blinds and sees the city in its entirety. Trash overwhelms the landscape and skyscrapers are broken down and held together with some sort of industrial rope. Reality sets in just as Dr. Lexus is realizing that Joe is some sort of unscannable vagrant. Both of them lose it and Dr. Lexus presses the button that triggers an alarm. Joe runs away from the doctor's office and heads out into the city to see all the modern ads and people. He realizes that the world is in crisis and it has no stable economy, and that the #1 movie in the country was literally titled Ass, and people loved it. It won an Oscar. He then sees a Carl's Jr. machine that dispenses food to a lady who's attempting to get the food, but only receives an empty box. The machine still charges her and states that her balance is 0. After she bangs on the machine, it warns her that she's committing vandalism and proceeds to dispense a spray that subdues her, and then tells her that her kids are starving. The machine claims that Carl's Jr. believes that no child should go hungry, calls her an unfit mother, and says that her children are now custody of Carl's Jr. Joe goes over and tries to get something to eat from the machine and is then approached by the authorities. They presume that he's the unfit mother and take him into custody. They too realize that Joe is unscannable and tackle him and arrest him. In the car, he sees Rita's pod and he attempts to tell the authorities what's really been happening, and they spray him with some sort of compliance spray or something. He's taken to court and he states his case in a calm and reasonable manner, but the judge and jury continue to just call him a fag and throw things at him and sentence him to jail. While incarcerated, he's forced to get this tattoo, since in this world, the tattoo is the only way to be considered a legitimate citizen and to make purchases. Eerily familiar to the Mark of the Beast type stuff we're dealing with today. They sit him down and tell him to stick his arm into this big machine. The machine asks him some questions and he answers that he's not sure. And the machine takes this as his name, despite his protests, and they don't really let him change it. This tattoo is what they use to track and scan all of their citizens. Next, he takes an IQ test, and it seems that he's quite smart. Realizing this, he outwits the police and escapes back into the city to search for where he came back into consciousness. He meets back up with the guy whose house his pod broke into, and he learns that there is a time machine. And he uses his newfound genius to convince this guy, who goes by the name of Frito, to help him. So Frito tells him that the time machine is at Costco, and Joe says they have to find Rita, which they do. She doesn't seem too fazed by the state of things, and she has basically just continued her work as a Lady of the Night. She realizes that people are dumber than usual, of course, but in her line of work, she was fairly used to that. So Joe and Frito pick her up, but are quickly found by the police and chased all the way around the Costco, which is a massive, massive place with colossal ceilings, shipping containers, a rail system, and a Starbucks, which is now a brothel at every corner. So they walk around for some time looking for this time machine until the cops eventually raid the area and Joe is taken again into custody. This time, however, he's taken straight to the White House. To his shock, he's not only above average intelligence, but the smartest man on Earth. And this has attracted the attention of the highest levels of government. He meets with the leaders of the free world, President Dwayne Elizano Mountain Dew Herbert Camacho and his cabinet. He insists that there's been some sort of mistake, that the test he took, to him, was incredibly simple, and states that he isn't the smartest guy in the world. However, as he looks around at the people's blank faces, he second-guesses himself. The President Camacho, is a world-famous wrestler, but seems to take a liking to Joe. They swear him into being the Secretary of Interior, a position that he doesn't even understand. The swearing process is more like a WWE event and less like a political event. The president publicly gives his word that not sure, Joe, is the smartest man on Earth, and he's gonna fix everything, end the Dust Bowl, heal the economy, cure car sickness and acne in just 1 week. And if he doesn't, the president will basically kick his butt and throw him back into jail. So Joe doesn't really have a choice at this point, and he goes along with the plan despite his hesitation. He uses his newfound power to get Frito back so he can find the time machine secretly while he pretends to help the president. They take Joe to the fields to investigate why the plants aren't growing, and there he discovers that the plants are being sprayed with Brondo, the energy drink that he first tasted in the water fountain at the hospital. He and Rita realize that Brondo, the thirst mutilator, had replaced water everywhere but the toilets. Water was just too much of a threat to Brondo's profit margin. This Brando company bought out the FDA and FCC so that they could sell anything they wanted. Joe realized that this is an obvious problem, and he realizes that he can fix it. However, the people are so conditioned by ads and the food pyramid that the concept of Brando not being what plants crave is utterly ridiculous to them. They literally cannot grasp the concept. So, Brando is cut and water replaces it, and this causes Brando stocks to plummet, which causes massive layoffs, causing masses of angry people. The other members of the cabinet turn on Joe and say that this is all his fault and get angry with him. So even though Joe is ultimately solving a huge problem, the world around him revolves around this Brando stuff, and people can't wait for crops to grow back and things to get better. They're really angry in this moment, and they become vicious. It's like if we just shut down Dow Chemical, even though that they're causing massive damage, to our world, thousands will be laid off and be angry and upset, causing major uproar and panic. People wouldn't really be concerned about one poisoned lake or poisoned crops as long as they had a job to support their family, a TV, or some food on the table. So it's a double-edged sword. So Joe is now in some hot water. The news is painting him to be a villain, and his court case isn't going so well. Yet again, the judge and jury don't really want to hear his side and just mock him instead of hearing him out. He's sentenced to something called rehabilitation, which is really just a monster truck rally in which huge trucks are put up against an opponent in a tiny car, an obvious unfair advantage for the court system. I think that the size of the vehicles really illustrates the power imbalance of the court system and the individual, but with Joe's superior intellect, he manages to win the match, playing out the brains over brawn scenario perfectly. I think that's about as far as I'll go for now, because I don't want to spoil the ending, and that's really the most interesting and uncanny parts of the movie, but I recommend watching it if you haven't already. Personally, I really enjoyed this film in a strange, melancholy way. Mike Judge obviously is a man of high intellect who can follow a train of thought and illustrate it in a more palatable way than just saying, "Why is everyone these days so dang stupid?" The situation Joe finds him in forces him to take a stand for humanity, and he really changes a lot throughout the film. And in the end, you're sort of proud of him and Rita. Personally, I have hope for the world because of films like this one that can really open our eyes. I saw this as a teenager a few years after it came out, and at first it made me feel really sick to my stomach because even back then I felt like it was coming true. Now, as an adult, I watch it and I know it's coming true, but I also know that I'm not alone in this, kind of idea, and there's a massive effort to prevent this sort of reality from manifesting. I think that the best way to make a clear point is through art, and I have a lot of respect for Mike Judge, not only for this, but for his other works. I'm certain that we don't agree on all fronts, and it's very likely that he would find mine Unveiled asinine, and I wouldn't blame him. Overall, I just think that this is a really interesting movie, and, it puts things in perspective in a funny and ironic way. So definitely give it a watch, and thanks again for listening, and I really want to do more of these. This was kind of a shorter movie, but there's a lot of really interesting movies to go over, and if you have any suggestions, please let me know. I'm also really gonna the books Unveiled might take a little bit longer because, like I said, I have to read the book again, but yeah, let me know if you like this, and let me know what you think about the movie if you have or haven't seen it, and what kind of weird things did you see in the movie, and yeah, just let me know what you think. Thanks again, and all we can hope is that our minds be unveiled.
Let go of everything you think to be true. Relax the mind and ask the question, do I truly understand what this reality is?